Life as We Know It with Tom Walton.
One of my favorite things to do from time to time is pick a year from the past and research what life was like in America back then. I have just one rule: the year I pick must be during my lifetime. Trust me, that means I have a lot of choices. Let me share with you what I learned about 1957. President Dwight Eisenhower began his second term in office. You knew that, I'm guessing. But what about some developments in 1957 that you might not know or recall? The most popular children's toys that year were Slinkies and hula hoops. Remember those? And Wham-O introduced a toy that is still a big deal today, the Frisbee. Did you know it was originally called the Pluto Platter because of all the alleged flying saucer sightings at the time? Wham-O bought the Pluto Platter from its inventor, changed the name to Frisbee, and the toy remains wildly popular today. The story goes that Frisbee was chosen as the name because of the flying disc's resemblance to pie tins used by the Frisbee Pie Company in Connecticut many years earlier. In 1957, Toyota began selling cars in America for the first time. The Suez Canal crisis finally ended. The space race geared up in earnest after the old Soviet Union put a satellite called Sputnik in orbit. South Vietnam was attacked by the Viet Cong that year, and we all know how that turned out. Elvis Presley purchased Graceland in Memphis in 1957. America's first nuclear power plant opened in Shippingport, Pennsylvania. Law enforcement began using portable radar devices to enforce speed limits on our highways for the first time. 1957 was a big year for the state of Michigan, regardless of whether you lived in the Mitten or the UP. That was the year the Mackinac Suspension Bridge opened, finally establishing a connection for automobiles that didn't involve ferry boats. 1957 was the first year that 2/3 of all new cars were purchased on credit. Generationally, times were changing. My father didn't believe in credit. He never bought a car unless he could pay cash. I didn't have the luxury of waiting that long and didn't want it. A new car cost about $2,700, and for that you got a big engine and huge tail fins. One of the year's biggest stories was a tragedy, the Asian flu pandemic. More than 1 million lives were lost worldwide. That's far less than the 6.8 million lives lost so far to the COVID pandemic, but at the time it was equally terrifying. How about prices in 1957? That's always a fun exercise. A gallon of gas was 24 cents, a dozen eggs, 28 cents. The yearly inflation rate was 3%. The average price of a new house was $12,220. Average annual wages were just $4,550. The big movies that year included The Bridge Over the River Kwai and 12 Angry Men. Perry Mason and Maverick were the hit shows on television back in 1957. You remember them, right? Well, despite the turmoil of 1957, it was part of a far more innocent time. I miss 1957 and all of the 50s a lot.
Life as We Know It is written and hosted by Tom Walton and is a production of WGTE Public Media. Life as We Know It with Tom Walton can be heard on WGTE FM 91 every Monday afternoon during All Things Considered at 5:44 p.m. or hear past episodes at wgte.org/life.